So let's just jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack why isolating yourself for the sake of safety is actually, believe it or not, the single biggest risk to your personal growth. We often think that building these massive walls around our beliefs, our friend groups, and our identities, we think it keeps us safe from all the chaos out there, right? But what if that instinct just completely locks you into a rigid way of thinking? What if the very walls you're building to protect your mind are actually, literally, locking you in a prison of your own making?
Just think about it for a second. When was the absolute last time you stepped completely outside your comfort zone? Like into a room full of people who think, act, or live entirely differently than you do? It's so human to just want to find a comfortable little tribe, pull up the drawbridge, and post guards at the gate. I mean, we constantly consume media that just pats us on the back and validates us, right? It feels safe, it's cozy. But the source material we're digging into today makes a really fascinating argument. The exact moment you let your mind calcify into this heavily guarded fortress, well, that's when the real danger actually begins. Which brings us to part one, the dangerous mental fortress. Let's look at a really stark contrast here. First, imagine a fortress. You're standing up on these huge, high walls, thinking you've got this amazing view of everything, but in reality, the world is just walking right around you. You're completely isolated, and honestly, all you're getting is a giant echo chamber of your own voice. Now flip that. Imagine the Palace of Versailles. The source uses this absolutely brilliant metaphor. The world isn't some flat, empty battlefield you need to defend. It's this massive, gorgeous palace with interconnected rooms. Banquets, secret little meetings, chance encounters. They're all happening at the exact same time. The people who truly grow in life, they don't just lock themselves in one tiny room and declare themselves king. No way. They break out of that rigid thinking, and they walk freely between the corridors.
Okay, let's move on to the next big concept, cultivating circle penetration.
Now, I know the word penetration sounds intense, but it's absolutely not about people-pleasing or forcing your way in. It's this incredibly fluid, low-posture ability to enter different social circles. Think of it like water taking the exact shape of whatever cup you pour it into. It's about stepping into a room, quickly picking up on the local language, and just naturally existing there without having to totally assimilate, fake who you are, or slap some rigid label on yourself.
Just imagine acting like that ultimate house party guest out in the real world. You can sit down with a bunch of scholars or academics and geek out about structural theories. Then you walk right into the next room, grab a coffee with some merchants or business owners, and smoothly pivot to talking all about risk and margins. Later, you're chatting with everyday folks at the grocery store about making a living, and by the evening, you're sitting with powerful executives, totally understanding their boundaries and influence. It's a total game changer. So many people completely stunt their personal growth because they literally glue a super specific label to their own forehead way too early in life. And once you do that, bam, you've permanently locked yourself in just one single room.
Let's jump into our third core idea, why web connections are your absolute best defense. Think for a second about the most toxic dynamics you've ever dealt with, maybe at work or even in certain friend groups. The real manipulators out there, like, say, the classic office gossip, they usually don't bother spinning massive, complicated webs of lies. No, they do something so much simpler and honestly more dangerous. They cut your connections. They actively try to isolate you. They want to be your one and only source of truth. Basically, they want to compress your massive, beautiful palace down into a single, narrow little hallway. Because once they do that, it becomes incredibly easy to mislead you. This is exactly why single-line dependence is just incredibly fragile. If you're relying on one single narrative, you are so easily isolated and highly manipulable. But web-like distribution, that's a whole different ballgame. When you're moving freely through the different rooms of Versailles, you're naturally going to hear like 3 different versions of the exact same event. You get to cross-check reality instantly. It's kind of like swiping through 3 different apps on your phone just to verify a news story before you believe it. True security isn't firmly planting your feet in the mud and declaring a side. It's knowing for a fact that you always have multiple other doors to walk through. Which leads us perfectly into the final section, always move like the wind. Whether we're talking about ruthless office politics or just your own personal stagnation, you really only become a target when you stand perfectly still. The source drops this absolutely profound quote, "Hunters need fixed coordinates." I mean, wow, right? If a competitor, a harsh critic, or a toxic coworker wants to take you down, they literally need you to be predictable. They need you stuck in one spot. But if you are constantly, fluidly wandering through the palace, you never give them that fixed target. You can think of it exactly like playing a game of dodgeball. Not sitting still is this incredible form of strategic lightness.
participating in the game without getting totally bogged down, constantly adjusting your posture, and knowing when to just leave the room before a bad situation solidifies, that is your greatest strength. You still show up, right? You contribute, you make a real impact, but you don't tie your entire emotional well-being to one single path. You become practically impossible to perfectly define, and that makes you incredibly resilient to whatever gets thrown at you.
So, how does this actually play out in practice? Well, it's a bit of a process. First off, phase 1. You arrive in a new social or professional room and you just observe. You feel out the vibe. Then, phase 2. You participate. You genuinely connect with the scholars, the merchants, the everyday folks. Then comes phase 3. You adapt. If the environment suddenly turns toxic or rigid, you don't dig your heels in for some bitter, exhausting fight. Nope, you just adjust your posture. And finally, phase 4, you leave the danger zone. You just smoothly walk through one of those interconnected doors into a brand new room long before the concrete ever has a chance to dry around your feet.
Because at the end of the day, the true structure of the world really is a palace of connected rooms. Sure, building a mental fortress might make you feel strong for a minute, but ultimately, it just makes you slow, isolated, and super fragile. Don't be a chess piece permanently glued to one square on the board. Break out of that rigid thinking. Be the wind that just blows freely through the beautiful corridors of Versailles. The wind doesn't need to rule the palace, but it's everywhere, and absolutely no one can trap it. So take a hard look at your own life today. Where have you built unnecessary walls? And, much more importantly, which new room are you going to confidently walk into tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. It's been a blast, and I'll catch you on the next one.